I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. The Nuremberg trials. A 15-year-old, Maria, she takes the stand to testify about her abuse, the abuse she suffered at the hands of the Hitlerites. She tells a story that begins with the assassination by operation of Heydrich, the head of the SS, a brutal man. This is 1942. However, what followed that was a retaliation by the Hitlerites. Rounded up a whole village, shot all the men, took the women and children, separated them, sent the women to Ravensbrück, where they were destroyed, and chose from the children seven. Seven chosen, the rest sent to destruction. Those children were chosen for a special task by the Hitlerites. I welcome now Tim Tate. Tim is the co-author with a new book, Hitler's Forgotten Children. Ingrid von Oelhoffen and Tim Tate are the authors, a true story of the Lebensborn program, one woman's search for her real identity. Tim, a very good evening to you. Maria, the fascination here is what happened to her. Everyone else in the village was destroyed. This was testimony at the Nuremberg trials, case number 8. The program is called Lebensborn. What did the tribunal learn in 1947 about Maria? Good evening to you.
Good evening. They learned that she was one of the survivors, as you said, of the extermination of her village, the village called Lidice, in retaliation for the assassination of Heydrich, and that she had been taken off to a Nazi program, a very secretive Nazi program called Lebensborn, which took what, to use its phrase, racially valuable children from countries that the Nazis conquered, took them back to Germany and essentially rebranded them as good little Aryan children.
So she was abducted on the basis of what? What was the filter that was used on all these children that only 7 passed?
The initial filter was looks, blonde, blue-eyed, what you would associate with Aryan. After that, there was a whole, and in my view, truly obscene process in which doctors, or racial examiners, as the Nazi called them, measured their noses, their foreheads, their eyes, their ears, and determined from there what racial origin they were.
So Maria, who is from Czechoslovakia at that point, near Prague, she is abducted, kidnapped by the Nazis. To what end? What did they aim to do with her?
What the Lebensborn program was in Himmler's view, Himmler being the second most powerful man in Nazi Germany and the head of the SS, it was a program to create a new master race, a pure Aryan, the next generation, if you like, a pure Aryan generation who were to become the aristocracy of the Third Reich once it had triumphed in its total wars all over Europe.
We leave Marie, who gets justice inadvertently because of the Nuremberg trials, though the men and women put on trial for Lebensborn are not punished, though they were the second wave of war criminals. They are not punished commensurate with their crime. And we go now to 1945. Ingrid von Oelhoffen is now 3.5 years old. She's living with her mother and her grandmother and her brother Dietmar, but not with her father. Let's meet her mother, Gisela. Who is she in 1945, and what does Ingrid believe of her?
Gisela von Oelhoffen was a member of the old Hanseatic, the upper class of the German, sort of German aristocracy. They're well off. They have a comfortable life throughout the war, and she, as far as Ingrid is concerned, is Ingrid's mother.
Mm. The father, Hermann, is not living with them regularly. He's much older. He was wounded in the First War. He has an Iron Cross. What does she know of him in 1945?
Very little. She knows that he is not living with them, that he is, as far as she believes, her father, but that her mother and father don't live together. just to back up slightly, the ostensible reason that Ingrid is not with her father, and her father and her mother aren't together, is that Gisela has escaped from the Soviet zone of Germany and gone to the Western zone, and one of the Western zones, and Herman hadn't.
We have a story of a family that is very much fragmented in the early years. Herman goes in one direction, Gisela goes in another with her mother. There's an aunt as well. And our heroine, Ingrid, is observing this as a child. However, there's more to it. I understand, Tim, that Ingrid very early on understood that the household was cold to her, that her mother wasn't responsive. Is that correct?
Absolutely true. Ingrid knew that her mother wasn't warm and loving to her, and much though Ingrid wanted it, for the very simple reason that Gisela put Ingrid into a children's home and left her there for many years.
She puts her into a home, it's called Nothhelfer. It's a church-run home, and there are letters reproduced in the book that are heartbreaking. Dear Mommy, please take me home forever. Gisela was living at this point in Hamburg. She's escaped from the east, Mecklenburg. She's escaped to the west. She's living in Hamburg with her mother and her aunt and taking on a life. In fact, she has a boyfriend. She has another son and won't send for Ingrid. What does Ingrid believe is the reason for that?
She doesn't know. She's a small child. All she knows is that she's desperate for her mother. She's longing for her mother's love, and she doesn't get it.
Her father, Herman, much older and not as well-to-do as Gisela. He lives on a pension. At one point, when Ingrid goes to live with her father after the church orphanage, she wakes up with an affliction. She has to go to the doctor, and there's a health card. This is national health. This is early in the 1950s in Germany. When they arrive at the doctor's office, Ingrid sees that there is a card, her health card, and on the card is the name Erika Matko. What does Ingrid at the time think that means? Does her father explain it to her?
Absolutely not. She has no idea. She's sitting with her father in the doctor's waiting room, and the doctor calls out for Erika Matko to come into the consulting room, and Ingrid's father takes her, Ingrid, in there. The confusion, why is this name Erika Matko being called, is not explained. Her father doesn't talk about it. He's a very stiff, a very formal, and in fact somewhat frightening figure for her, and she doesn't feel able to ask him. So at that point, she simply doesn't know.
1954, Herman dies. Ingrid finally goes to Hamburg to live with her mother, again in a cold environment, and one day she sees her picture on a poster in Hamburg. Why is her picture there, and what does she make of it?
Well, before she goes, before her father died, her father's housekeeper has told Ingrid, "You aren't actually his daughter. You're not the daughter of Herman and Gisela. You were fostered. They're looking after you. You're not their blood daughter." Herman dies. Ingrid goes eventually to live with her mother, what we must now call her foster mother, Gisela, in Hamburg. And as you say, one day she sees her own face staring out of a poster stuck to a pole or something in the street. And the reason for that is that the Red Cross at that point, in that International Red Cross, was searching for missing children who had been taken from the East. And they didn't know the names, they just had photographs, they had a few records, and the poster with Ingrid's face on said, "Does anyone know this child?"
I have a quote from the book. The lost identity of individual children is the social problem of our time. This is 1956 Germany. So Germany is aware of this issue, but it's not doing anything very effectively. There are helpers, what we would call NGOs today, but not significant at this point. When we come back, we're going to turn to how how Ingrid continues